Green Bay is a small town, only 100,000 people. Those 100,000 people may be different in many ways, but there's one thing that brings them all together: the Green Bay Packers. In Titletown, the blue-collar city only knows hard work, tailgating, championships, but more importantly, they know family. We have a saying in this town: faith, family, and the Green Bay Packers are all that you need. Matt and I grew up in Green Bay. You could say that we are Green Bay, or even better, the voices of Green Bay. We bring a local feel of Packer fandom to a worldwide audience. Friendship, family, and football. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Freezer Podcast. We are back. This is the Freezer Podcast. I'm Sanjay.
And I'm Matt.
We are already done with episode 1 of this week, and we're doing episode 2 for you guys as a special. Hey, we really didn't do anything for 2 weeks, and now we're here bringing you guys a lot of content. During a very crucial
news period.
Yeah. We're trying to catch up with everything Packers related as we are to the minute of the day here in April, right before the draft is upon us. But right now, we have someone amazing with us that joined us not too long ago. Maggie Loney. She is here today to join us and give us her perspective on the schedule and some draft things. You can still follow her at Maggie, and it's going to be at Loney now, right? Or is it still Maggie Lawler on Twitter, though? I guess that's my question to you.
Like every variation of Maggie Loney on Twitter was taken. So I'm going to keep my OG handle. Okay, perfect.
So it's still at Maggie Lawler. You can follow her on Twitter. She still does amazing stuff at the Lombardi Lounge, which I also write for too. So if you got some time on your hands and you want to read some awesome Packer content, go check out the Lombardi Lounge because she does some great work there, and I do some moderately okay stuff. But
occasionally contribute.
Occasionally contribute, exactly. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. It's obviously a pleasure for us to have your expertise, your opinions, your takes. It's one of a kind, I'll tell you that.
I hope that's like a good one of a kind.
It is. Of course.
You guys are way too nice to me, so.
Well, I mean, when you call us your favorite name, because obviously alluding to BJ Raji, which I will have to ask, and did you put on the BJ Raji jersey tonight?
Yeah, I am wearing one right now, but it's one that I got at a thrift shop, and it's like a XXL Acme Packer jersey, and that's why I don't have my webcam on, because I look like a Packer.
Hey, it doesn't matter. You still have the jersey on. It represents who we are here at the Freezer Podcast. And for the deep Packer fans who know who that is and what BJ Raji really was as a nickname here, it was the Freezer. So, Maggie, let's not take any time away from, your time here, but we talked about the schedule in the last show, and it's obviously kind of become a, I guess you could say like a celebration now when the schedule comes out.
It's like the highlight of the offseason. You live and die by a couple of dates. The schedule release being one of them.
Exactly, which is funny because they still leak everything based on 5 hours prior. So I'm always kind of like, man, can I just go without looking at Twitter for 7 to 8 hours and then just hear it on ESPN?
We can't.
But we can't, right? So, Maggie, I just want to get your first initial thoughts on the schedule release.
I am really annoyed by the fact that the Packers are closing against the Lions.
Thank you.
Again.
Yes.
I was really hoping that the Packers were going to close against the Bears for the 200th game. I think when you look at the division, and maybe it's my bias talking, I thought maybe the Packers and the Bears are the two teams to watch in the NFC North this year. I think the Lions will be decent, but I don't think that they're quite ready for a playoff push, and I think the Vikings are going to be hindered as long as they have Kirk Cousins as their quarterback. So I was hoping that we would have a big NFC North showdown for Week 17, but I guess when you think about it, the entire last 3 weeks of the schedule are a big NFC North showdown. So
yeah,
unless you go 2-1 or 3-0 to finish out the season, I think that's really going to be the defining moment. I think obviously you have to build up to that, but how you perform down that final stretch is really going to set up either your success in the playoffs or it's going to get you eliminated from the playoffs altogether.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the allure and the the hype and the quality of game two would have probably been better, obviously, against the Bears or maybe even the Vikings. But I'm not going to lie, it would be kind of nice to be like, you need that extra W at the very end, and you're like, well, we got the Lions. I mean, they do play us tough. Matt Patricia is obviously a new defensive mind there in Detroit, and we did get a loss against him, the two of them, obviously. So, but unlike the Bears and the Vikings, I think it would be a little bit easier test against the Lions in that last game. But I do agree, it does stink to see them again. It seems like they just want to plug that game in. It's like they just copy and paste. They're like, oh, we got that one. Okay, we're good. But did you see who the Bears play on Week 17 anyway? Do they play anybody significant?
That has to be the Vikings, right?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so so they have probably the harder one. So hopefully that's, if it comes down to it where we each need a game one, I mean, hopefully, that kind of comes down to it and, plays a big impact.
Yeah,
but, I mean, really by week 17, we will have gone 15-0 and we'll be.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Maggie. Yeah, you're right. On paper right now, it looks like, it probably would be like a 15-1 season or 16 and maybe 16-0.
I want to jump in. Kind of my first takeaway was the sheer amount of home games in the front half of the schedule. I think it's 5 of the first 7 are at home. To me, I think that helps out Matt LaFleur, kind of getting to stay in a routine at home. I think they have 3 in a row after starting out at Chicago. Maggie, how do you think that'll impact sort of the freshman head coach's sort of approach to the season? I think that helps him out a little bit.
Yeah, I go back and forth on it. I think that from a team perspective and from how you'd want to start your season as a brand new head coach, they couldn't have gotten any luckier as far as kind of those first 5 games in the first 7 weeks being home games. And I know I had a disagreement on Twitter about this with fans about the allure of playing at Lambeau Field in December. And I think you always play tough at home in December, despite the record and despite what happened, with the Cardinals last year, Mike McCarthy's last game. So it was unfortunate to me to look at the schedule and see that there weren't as many games at home at Lambeau when it's going to be cold and when you might have that advantage against, I was hoping like the Panthers would come to town late in the season or the Raiders or something like that. So you can kind of have that weather advantage. But outside of that, I think that, Matt LaFleur's really set up nice to kind of acclimate his team to his offense. And the bye weeks, or the mini bye weeks, I guess you can call them, really help. Those Thursday night games early in the season that give them a little bit of extra prep time for their opponents.
That's what I thought too. I mean, you get the Bears, right away in the kickoff game, and then you kind of, like you said, have that mini bye week before the Vikings come to town. I mean, talk about deja vu, the same exact 2 teams as it was last year. But then you kind of get into some, more uncommon opponents, as McCarthy used to say. You get the Broncos in town, the Eagles, then you're at Dallas, and you got the Raiders coming in after the Lions. So I'm with you that I think that those mini bye weeks and the fact that they can kind of, I guess, dig their feet in a little bit at home and get in a routine, I think is going to aid them. And then in the second half of the season, after the bye week, you're on the road 4 of the last 6, the last 2 being, division opponents. So kind of that the teeth of the schedule, if you will, right there staring at you at the end. And you do not have the luxury, really of, being afforded that home crowd late in the year, as you kind of see in past seasons where the Packers have had a bunch of home games late on. You can kind of, lean on that. But they're going to have to go on the road as a young team with a young coach. Like you said, kind of initially, it's going to be a big test and will really determine, I think, their sort of playoff viability.
Maggie, what is your – I know because you're obviously a gold package season ticket holder. What is your initial thoughts? Because, I feel like sometimes they give you some good games. Like the year that you had the Giants and the Colts, I was like, man, you get the Giants primetime and you get the Colts. I was like, man, those are 2 games I would have gone to. But this year you get Raiders and you get Broncos. What's your initial thought on those games that you get to go to?
I know that some of the gold package fans weren't as excited about that because they – arguably are teams that are in the middle of a rebuild. The Raiders for sure. But, the Raiders still have Antonio Brown. That'll be something new and exciting for them. The Broncos have Joe Flacco if he does indeed start, which I think he will for at least a year. So to me, I always like going to the AFC games. I really liked going to the Bengals game a couple of years ago because it's such an uncommon opponent. It's a lot easier to get to like a Philadelphia game. We see them a lot even in the preseason. Looking at the preseason schedule, I was a little surprised because it is, really AFC heavy. I know we typically play the Chiefs. You try and stay in that central time zone. But even the preseason game, like the gold package got the Texans this year, and that's pretty exciting to think for, big Wisconsin Badger fans that J.J. Watt gets to come to town. So I was more than fine with the way the schedule shook out. I will be at both games, so if you see me, come say hi to me. I drink beer.
All right.
I mean, that's kind of a
You're
must.
amongst friends.
You walk into the city, you might want to drink something. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. I think in the end, Matt and I go to, obviously the other ones, and it's cool regardless. I mean, in the end, it's Packer football. It's in that great stadium. It's with great people for the most part, and you're getting to see 60 minutes of just Aaron Rodgers singing it.
And like Maggie said, I always liked going to the games where you play the more uncommon opponents. Just like going to the rivalry games against the Bears and the Vikings, like that's always fun because there's a lot of jaw jacking between the fans. But I love when you get those out of town fans like Denver or Oakland who don't really get to come to Lambeau and Green Bay much, and they're much more like very receptive to the experience, and you can kind of be a chauffeur.
And they give good feedback too, because
yeah,
you get Denver fans like, wow, Green Bay's really nice. It's not like it's not like Philly fans where they're just all complete assholes.
We're nice.
But I think it's cool to see that too, because I'm sure you're gonna run into those fans a lot those two games from Denver and from I guess what do we say, Oakland and LA or Las Vegas. I'm sure they're gonna be coming from everywhere. But Maggie, let's take a real quick we'll kind of take a couple of these games, but let's start out with that home opener. And obviously, we know what it means for the Packers to get off to a hot start right away, especially with like what Matt mentioned before, having 5 of your 7 being at home. This one obviously is on the road, but it is against the division winner of a year prior. It's against a really vaunted defense. We'll see how vaunted it is without Vic Fangio, but what is your initial thoughts on September 5th?
I mean, I know that Packer fans don't want to hear that there's even a possibility that the Packers could lose at Soldier Field to the Bears, and I'll try to talk about it in a way that doesn't allude to that, but also alludes to that. If Matt LaFleur takes you in his debut as the head coach into your longest, toughest rivalry, week 1 at an away game, and wins, he's going to set the tone for, they're going to make a bust for him at the Packers.
Yeah, there'll be a street, and he'll get the bust, and he'll get probably a pillar at some point.
He'll be on the fence.
He'll get a street at least named after him, probably by week 2. But I think that the Bears defense did get worse, and, of course they have their draft picks, but they did lose Vic Fangio, like you said. Their secondary got...
Buster Screen and Haha. I mean, I don't really know if that's addition or if that's subtraction, really.
Right, and Callahan too. I don't remember where he ended up.
He went to Denver actually to go be with his coach.
Right. Okay. Yep. So we'll see him soon too.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that honestly, it's going to be a good game, of course. But the Packers defense got quite a bit better already this offseason. The Packers have 2 first-round picks. The Bears don't have any first-round picks. You look at the way that the Packers have set themselves up for this type of rebuild and for the immediate success that they can see in the regular season. And the Bears, yes, they have Khalil Mack, who is, without a doubt, the star of the defense, the star of the whole team. But, he, as one player, is not going to make up for all of the additions that the Packers have made and will be making, and the Bears are really hindering themselves now, trying to rebuild some of that depth, especially with his massive contract. They weren't able to go out and be as active in free agency as maybe they would have liked.
Yeah, I agree, and I think with the Bears game, I think it really does send a message to not only the NFC North, but it does send a message in the NFC that, yes, we were a 6-9-1 team. We had some dysfunction. You heard about the dysfunction. We're past that. We're with LaFleur. We're with this new offense, and we're here to come back and get our spot in that, in those 6 spots that, get taken up in January. So I agree completely. Matt, what about you?
I mean, I want to echo, Maggie's sentiments there, that it's the perfect kind of springboard game. If they can come out right away, and remember, this is going to be a lot of unscouted stuff for the Bears. They don't know what the Packers are going to do. I mean, granted, it's week one, it's kind of both sides, but it's a whole new regime, and so they don't have the benefit of looking at, well, last year and McCarthy did this.
Right,
this,
we didn't know what Matt Nagy was going to do, so now they have no idea what about us.
Exactly. So if they can come out and do, surprise them, if you will, on both sides, I think that they can get out to a lead. It's a familiar opponent in the end of the day. The Packers aren't by any means intimidated by going to Chicago at any point in the year to face them. So, I think in a way they're playing with house money. It's going to be on the Bears. They're hosting the game. It's year 2 of Nagy and company. Whereas the Packers have the new coach, a slew of new players. How are they going to look? There's probably a built-in excuse if they came out flat. But I honestly think, as Roger said, we're not taking a year off. We're going for it. So I expect them to show up and get ready for a dogfight.
Maggie, so looking at these first, 7 games before that Kansas City Sunday nighter, we really can get out to the gates pretty well. I mean, like you said, we have the Cubs, the Bears. We have them at least with a kind of an advantage because they don't really know who we are. The Vikings, it'll still be a tough game. Those 2 first games will be down to the wire. I'm sure it'll kind of come down to the last drive or some sort of play that kind of ends it. But you look at Broncos, you look at Eagles. Dallas is another home game, I feel like, but we'll see. Now it's not McCarthy running the offense. We'll see what LaFleur can do down in there. But Detroit and Oakland, you got to think that we could stay above 500, and that's got to be a good chance of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially early on, knowing that you're going to struggle, or struggle is not the right word, but knowing that you have a really tough stretch going back-to-back, the Chiefs and the Chargers, I look at the first 7 weeks and optimistically, and still I think kind of realistically, I give the Packers a good shot at going 5-2, and I think that those 5 W's really are going to be those 5 home games. That's the opportunity that you have to really set the pace going into that back half of the season. I think the Bears game is going to be really tough. Like you said, you've got that kind of element of surprise with there's not really much LaFleur tape to look at. I mean, I know you can look at his film from the Rams and the Titans, but this offense is going to run a lot differently with Aaron Rodgers than it would with Mariota.
Yeah.
Those 5 home games are kind of where you set the tone. If you get into week 3 or week 4 and you're at 2-2 or 1-3, then I think you maybe have to not get concerned because you look at the Colts and what they did with Frank Reich going out and at 1-5 and then making a postseason run. But these home games are really going to set the tone for the back half of the season. And if LaFleur, if he gets a W on the road, that is going to go a long way too.
Those are always steals, I feel like.
Well, this year more than ever, it really feels like get your home wins, because if you get your home wins, look before the bye week, that's six wins right there. I think that they have to, I'm stating the obvious here, but stack some wins up because you get to that second half, that last push, and you're on the road more often, where you're maybe set up for some more difficult games. None of those home games that I'm looking at am I going, that's a toss-up. I would favor the Packers, I think, in all 6 of those home games, pre-bye week.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I mean, the week 2 back-to-back Bears-Vikings, just like last season, that should have been 2-0. And I know that, Packer fans don't want to hear it. It's not like you can go back and get a W for what was a tie. But the Packers played the Vikings in a really good game at Lambeau last season.
They did.
I was there. It was very warm.
It was. I got sunburned.
Fans were very annoying.
Yeah, minus that fourth quarter just debacle of just giving up 21 straight points. It was a good game, yeah.
I will say, though, this is a little off topic, but you were talking about getting to see fans from other stadiums and other teams. And the Vikings fans that were around me had said that they won't go to any other division games in away stadiums, but they will always go to Lambeau Field because even though the Packers are probably their toughest rival, the Packer fans always treat them the nicest. So, Lambeau nice is taking over for that Minnesota nice, I think.
Sometimes I'm kind of like, we're the nice folks up here in Green Bay, but sometimes I kind of want to be like, yo, we're assholes up here too. Like we're not just giving you pies when you're walking our streets and say, hey, good luck today. Like, I mean, I want to be a little bit more intimidating, you know. But obviously, yeah, it is good to know that at least when people do come here, it's a great experience. It's going to be a fun experience because it is that family vibe when you do come here, and you know, obviously, it shows it when you do family night here, and you see all the other teams kind of saying, "Wow, they sell out in a practice." But let's just move forward, Maggie, and you know, we kind of, I mean, the Kansas City game. Let's just be honest; it's going to be a hype game. It's going to be Pat Mahomes, the young gun, versus, you know, this old guy.
The old sheriff.
Exactly, this old sheriff, you know, and Aaron Rodgers. And I feel like that will be highlighted, you know, pretty much to the extent that, you know, anyone can really highlight, just like it was with the Brady-Rodgers matchup last year. But I would like to talk about that Chargers game because that's something that I'm looking at because it's an away game. It's going to be in the StubHub Center, which I'm still wondering if there's going to be any room for Charger fans. Because
it'll be all Packer fans.
I feel like it's going to be all Packer fans. But the Chargers, it's a very interesting defense because I feel like it's very similar to like a Mike Pettin defense with a lot of deep defensive backs that can maybe possibly cause some confusion for Rodgers. I mean, I'm not saying that can come a lot, but you know, what is your thoughts about the Chargers, especially, you know, maybe not that Patriots game Chargers, but maybe the Ravens Chargers from the playoffs last year. What do you think you might see against the Rodgers kind of offense?
I'm really excited about the Chiefs and the Chargers. Those were selfishly the two games that I were hoping when the AFC played the Packers, that those would be the home games, you know, because those were the two that I would have dropped the most coin, I think, to go
of course.
and see.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we're close enough to Kansas City that I would consider the drive, but those tickets, like you said, are going to be astronomical. I think maybe the most interesting part specifically about the Chargers game is that this might potentially be the last time that Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers play each other, unless it's in a Super Bowl. You know, I don't know exactly how old Phillip Rivers is. I know he's a little bit older than Rodgers, but Rodgers is going to be 36 at the end of the season. They won't play again for 4 years. So
yeah, this could
be probably it. Yeah.
No.
You know, they're going to be, next time they see each other, they could be in their 40s. So it's kind of cool to think about the game from that aspect. But like you said, with the defense, that Chargers defense was really fun to watch towards the end of last season.
It really was.
The Ravens are. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Ravens do this year. I know that's a different conversation, but the way that the Chargers set themselves up for success against the Ravens, I am curious to see that matchup against Matt LaFleur, and I'm curious to see, I think, specifically how Matt LaFleur handles the slot in that game, kind of who's going to be that target, and if he's got a pass-catching back, whether that's Jones or Williams, maybe like a Capri Bibbs that's already on the roster. I'm still advocating for the Packers to get Duke Johnson from Cleveland, but I really don't think that's actually going to happen. That's just me thinking that because I say something, it might happen.
Hey, anything is possible, Maggie. Anything is possible. I mean, if we can get a Jari Evans 2 days before the draft, or a Muhammad Wilkerson a week before, I think anything is possible with your dreams. So don't give up on them. But you know, we will talk about that slot receiver because that's obviously a big topic, especially with next Thursday, basically a week from today. You know, as far as what the Packers will do. But you know, you look at this schedule as a whole, Matt and Maggie, like, you know, you have some, you know, pretty marquee names in pretty much in all these games. You got Eli. This could be the last time he might face Eli, you know, and, you know, you got Saquon, and then you have Jimmy G with San Francisco. What's going to be the situation with Cam Newton and that shoulder? You know, obviously we talked about Mahomes. You have the Eagles with Carson Wentz. What's that going to be like? There's a lot of, you know, storylines with all these matchups, which, I mean, that's the great parody of the league, you know, in 2019. But Maggie, is there anything that kind of just screams out to you that, you know, from the whole look at the schedule? I know we kind of talked about a few games, but is there just, you know, anything that kind of comes out at you as far as headlines, you know, for this 2019 season?
Well, I know that they had talked about how any primetime game in this season was kind of paying tribute to the fact that it was the 100th NFL season. So they wanted these games to have some type of significance in one way or another. So I think it's funny that this happened to be the season that we drew the AFC West, because you have Super Bowls against the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Chiefs.
Very true.
So I really like that dynamic. That's part of the reason I'm excited to have a gold package game against the Raiders, because, although the Packers in that Super Bowl were in their whites, it is kind of fun to think about, like, that dynamic of the Raiders coming to Lambeau, or, people might call it a revenge game, but the Broncos won the Super Bowl. Like, there's no revenge there. Even if you win a Super Bowl now, you're not getting revenge for the one you lost with Favre.
It's been long enough, yeah.
Those storylines.
Well, we could get revenge for the 6-0 debacle that we had that one year in Denver, and just absolutely look like we really didn't come into play. But that's a pretty good outlook at the season. We'll go more into that once we get into training camp and preseason. Obviously when the season comes, we'll break down each and every one of the games once we know what our final roster will look like on paper and after we've seen the team in preseason. But with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to have a little word with our sponsors here, and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back. Maggie, Matt, and Murphy. That's as much as I can really do.
Matt, and Murphy? Okay.
As much as I can really do here. But we just got done kind of talking about the schedule and what's to come for the 2019 season. Obviously, there's so far away from what the team will look like, come training camp time. We have a huge week next week with the draft, and if you want to see all your latest coverage, go check out all the different Packer sites and different Packer live drafts that they have with Cheesehead TV. Maggie will be a part of something. Why don't you plug that real quick, Maggie? You're going to be part of a nice little shindig with Andy Herman, are you not?
Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about it yet, and you put me on the spot, but Andy has a team of like 15 people that are going to be doing some live draft coverage, and to my understanding, we're all going to be hopping in and out as the night progresses. So I don't really know who I'm going to be talking about yet, if I'm even talking about Packer content, but Andy is the godfather. So definitely, if you are looking for a way to spend your draft night, go check it out. There's a ton of guys from Cheesehead TV, from Pack-A-Day, and plenty of other sites that'll be on there. So it'll be a good time.
Totally worth it. Mute your TV, get your laptop out or your tablet or your phone, pop that up and follow along with the Pack-A-Day and Maggie and everybody else. I think it's gonna be fun. I'll be tuning in. I know Sanjay will too.
Yeah, we have a little tradition. Matt and I, we go over to the Jensen residence. We go hang out with Chris and the dog, and
yep.
We just we crack open some nacho jalapeno cheddar cheese and some chips, and we watch the draft. I will be watching Draft Day. Our boy Andrew and I will be checking and watching the horrible movie Draft Day beforehand.
The Kevin Costner classic.
The Kevin Costner classic.
Hint, I've never seen it.
Which Andrew has never seen.
By the way,
you are in for a treat. Exactly. So check her out there. Check out our stuff at Lombardi Lounge. We are doing a 7-round mock right now. Each day we have a different round. Right now, I currently believe it's third round, I believe, correct, Maggie?
Today, the fourth round.
Today, fourth. This is where I am with it. I just send mine in, and I just kind of let things go. So, yeah, check us out there. It's Lombardi Lounge. We have so many amazing stuff, so many different writers, different people with different views on things that Packers related. So check that out. We really love it. But let's move on forward with some Twitter questions. Andrew, what do we got today?
So we got one from @Colin_Rickert. He says, should the Packers make a move and trade for a future first-round pick to get Trevor Lawrence?
Wow, that's looking really deep down the I guess the
down the rabbit hole there.
Yeah, I
mean, hey, in a perfect world, if Trevor Lawrence was to succeed Aaron Rodgers, you don't have to ask me twice. I'm all about it.
What was it like 8 years ago? Was it suck for luck? Like it was like, it's all these different things that everybody wants. This, coveted player, and you really have to be bad because this guy's going number 1 overall. That's a given, right?
Yeah,
Maggie, I don't know about you, but everybody on Twitter is saying 36 was when Favre was in a Packer uniform and we drafted Rodgers. So obviously the same could be said, coming up this year or maybe even next year. What's your thoughts?
I understand the Trevor Lawrence hype. He's a phenomenally talented guy. He plays for a really good team. It's kind of like all the Bama defensive prospects where they immediately their draft stock is elevated because they played for Bama. Like, he plays for a great program. It is way too early to start talking about what's going to happen in the draft in 2020, let alone what's going to happen by the time he's actually eligible to play.
He might stay a couple of years for all we know.
True. Okay, that's fair. But to me, I would prefer to not see the Packers take a quarterback at 30. I know Drew Lock was a mention there, whether or not that's a smokescreen or whether or not maybe they're actually concerned about Rodgers' health long term. I mean, he's had surgery on both collarbones, had a couple different ACL injuries. He had the MCL injury.
He had a calf injury.
An Iron Man. Eventually something could take him out of the game long term. So I totally understand the thought that maybe they need to start looking for the future at the position. But, the difference that I think people forget is that Favre had talked about retiring repeatedly.
Exactly.
Before he actually did, and then didn't. So, with Aaron, he's talked about following the TB12 program and playing into his 40s. So if his body cooperates, you might not be looking at another quarterback until he's 39 or 40. It could be a couple of years. And if there's a guy you really like, say a Josh Rosen, that you think, if something happens to Rodgers and he's out for a season, he's going to be your starter, you take a gamble on him. But if it's someone, if you're going to ride with Deshaun Kaiser, you're kind of accepting, like, the Packers know if something happens to Aaron Rodgers, their season's going to look dramatically different. It's like when we talk about the wide receiver position. If something happens to Devontae Adams, regardless of what the rest of the room looks like, your season's going to look different. Like, there's a couple players on every team that are game-altering. The Texans' defense looks different without J.J. Watt. So, you can make that argument for a lot of things. The Packers are doing their due diligence, and they'll get their research done on a lot of these quarterbacks, but there's no one, unless, like, Tom Brady decided mid-season that he wanted to be traded to the Packers, there's no one that can come in and replace Aaron Rodgers and save your season. So whether or not they take a quarterback early or they continue to develop Kaiser and Boyle, Aaron Rodgers is your guy, and he's going to be your guy for the next 4 years because you just paid him to be your guy, and you paid him a lot of money to be your guy.
See, I'm with you, Maggie. I think that, I understand the linking of the Packers to a quarterback because it's kind of in that time, but this scenario is completely different than where we were at with Brett Favre, who, every single year it was, well, will he, won't he, what's he going to do? There's no question Aaron Rodgers has not hid that he wants to play, until he's 40 or beyond, and the fact that Packers just gave him, a boatload of cash to keep playing. They've committed to him, for the next 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, whatever it is. So to me, you have these draft picks here in the first round. Go get him some extra talent. Go get him some guys around him, whether it's offensive line or, bolstering the defense further or some skill position guys in offense to make those final years much more relevant or easier for him. Spread the ball around, because I do think they need an influx of talent, and drafting a guy that's not going to play 3, 4, 5 years doesn't do us any good right now. I think that we're all in a win now mode. They've said as much. I think that drafting a quarterback right now would completely go against that. And if I'm not mistaken, I think if they were to look at a quarterback, wouldn't next year make more sense where it's a much deeper quarterback drafting? I know this year they have 2 first-rounders, but I feel like they would just end up reaching on somebody just because, one of them kind of came to us here. I don't think it's in the smart short-term move. Particularly when you're in a win-now mode. You gotta win,
absolutely. And it's weird because now I feel like we're in that phase with Rodgers that not like he's Andy Dalton, but like this contract is a very interesting contract because there's only the 3-year extension, and you are starting to figure out, is this going to be a healthy contract? Because if he does let's just say he goes into 2019, no injuries, I think you feel good about 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
But if he goes injured again for a lengthy time, for maybe 6+ games, or he's like last year where he's just a lingering injury that just doesn't seem like it's going to get better, then you start looking at 2020 where you're like, well, geez, now we really do need to get an insurance policy, because here's the thing. Packer fans don't need to keep seeing him get hurt and then us trotting out Deshaun Kaiser.
Same thing.
And then just tossing a little interception to Khalil Mack and letting him go pick 6. Like, we don't need that anymore. So I think you have to at least put that in the back of your mind. I don't think it needs to be the A, Trevor Lawrence. That's not going to happen. But B, you don't need to assess that this year for sure. But next year, you have to at least keep that in the back of your mind. If there's someone that you think that you could, maybe develop, or you just feel like is a really good project in the late rounds like we usually have done, maybe you look at that. But I think we're too far away from maybe the first or second round looking at a quarterback for the future right now with Rodgers at the helm.
They made the decision when they signed him long-term, I think. And in a year or two, if you want to go look at somebody, fine. If he comes out flat this year, okay, maybe it changes the conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and more so assume that Rodgers is going to regain their form and he's going to find his way again, and we're not going to be talking about this next year.
Well, that being said, Maggie, we know that you have obviously put out some different predictions as far as what's to come, next weekend. But what's kind of, I guess, could you give us a little insight into your 7-round mock? And I guess you could just really highlight the first 4 picks or so. But what do you guys, or I guess, what do you have coming up for this weekend?
Well, my mock has changed quite a bit. I mean, when we did our first mock in February, I really thought that Ja'Kai Polite could be the guy, because one thing about his game was that he always was able to force fumbles, and that's something that Mike Smith, the new outside linebackers coach, really preached, was his emphasis on forcing turnovers and forcing the defense to make those types of game-changing plays. Obviously, we know that he's kind of slipping. That's another conversation if you want to have it. I would take him in the 4th round, possibly with pick 75. But now my focus has kind of shifted where I still would like to see the Packers take an edge rusher or an interior defensive lineman with that first pick at pick 12. Given the fact that you've got Kenny Clark due for a massive contract, by no means do I think he leaves Green Bay. I think he'll stay put. But you do have Mike Daniels also with a contract coming up. I don't think he's coming back. My dream scenario, of course, is Ed Oliver at 12, but I'm not convinced Ed Oliver gets past pick 9 at the very latest. I think Brian Burns is also one of those edge rush really talented players. He's also really young, great bend, great ability to play inside or outside. So especially with the news that just came out about Montez Sweat and maybe some of his health concerns that teams have, and they're removing him from their boards, I think Brian Burns could be the guy that sees his stock go up now, maybe as a top 10 pick, and Sweat might start to slide down boards a little bit. So if I'm the Packers and I have a bevy of talent available to me at pick 12, I think I'm trading back. And I know that Packer fans don't want to hear that, because ideally you won't be picking as high as 12 for the rest of Aaron Rodgers' career, right? If all goes well with Matt LaFleur, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, like, you're going to be a playoff team, you should be picking in the late 20s. You should really be picking at 32 for the next 5 years. But
that's the plan.
That's not going to happen. So I'm going to trade pick 12 to the Steelers, maybe to the Raiders, and I'm going to collect some picks in the 20s. And I'm going to look at guys like Dalton Reisner. The more news that comes out from scouts and from people that follow the Packers really closely, whether they're beat writers or reporters, the Packers are doing their due diligence at the offensive line, like any of the positions, guard, tackle. So it seems more and more likely that the Packers are going for an offensive lineman really early. I think Dalton Reisner is about the perfect Green Bay Packers lineman. A couple other names I like if you're going deeper into the draft: Zach Allen, if you don't get someone like a Brian Burns or an Ed Oliver. He strikes me as a more athletic Dean Lowry, maybe a little speedier Dean Lowry. And again, Dean Lowry's contract is coming up soon. So maybe you start replacing some of that core defensive unit that works really well for Mike Pettin. I'm really high on a lot of the safeties in this draft. I don't think you can go wrong with a lot of them. Packer fans, of course, want Adderley. I would like him to wear 26. It would make me feel really nostalgic. But then you've got Juan Thornhill, Darnell Savage.
It's a very deep safety class this year.
Yeah, it's at first it didn't look like it was going to be, but the more you do your deep dive into them, it's a really talented class. So whatever happens with those first couple picks, I think the Packers will definitely target, those four main areas. Well, they'll need an edge rusher still, or an interior lineman. They'll need an offensive lineman, or maybe two. They'll need a safety, and eventually they'll need a tight end, because Jimmy Graham and Mercedes Lewis will probably only be in Green Bay for one more year.
How do you feel about, there's been a lot of talk about, Hockenson and Noah Fant here in Green Bay. The guys in the radio locally are all over those two. Me sitting here thinking, at 12, it's such a high pick, and to use it on a tight end, to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. I thought maybe if they could, as you kind of mentioned, move back a little bit and maybe get him and pick up an extra pick in the process. Or do you value... think that tight end is not that integral of a piece at this moment, despite the fact that you have some aging players there. How do you view that tight end? It's a need, but where would you slot that? Is it worth taking in the first, or is that something you want mid-round?
I mean, to me, if you look at kind of how Matt LaFleur shapes his offense, when he was with the Titans last season, he lost Delaney Walker really early, and he was playing with a couple of literal who is that at tight end? If you don't follow the NFL really closely, you're not going to know the tight ends that were on the Titans roster. So when you think about Matt LaFleur and how he structures his offense, he's got Devontae Adams. It's going to be a focal point. He's got Jimmy Graham, at least for another season, but Jimmy Graham has never really projected as a tight end. He's really more of like a big-bodied wide receiver. The guy can't really block. That's just not his role in the offense. So I think that they'll definitely address the tight end position in the first 4 rounds, would be my guess, but I don't think it'll be as high as the first round. And when you think about the tight end position long term, it's really hard to make that transition from college to the NFL. Wide receivers have a much easier time doing that. I know the playbook is tricky, as we saw, with the struggles from specifically Jamon Moore, but all the rookies kind of struggled to get on the same page with Rodgers. But tight end is a completely different beast, and it's really hard to adapt that first season. So I would feel more comfortable, I think, grabbing a guy in the 3rd or 4th round, letting him develop behind Jimmy Graham and Mercedes Lewis, and then letting him take over in year 2, whether he plays in the slot, whether he plays more of an H-back role. You have options and flexibility, but I would hate to see the Packers reach early knowing how many needs that they do have.
Yeah, I kind of have similar sentiments on that. I thought that, if they could get, one of those guys 2nd, 3rd round, it would make more sense, particularly if you're coveting some of those interior defensive linemen or edge rushers and they're kind of falling into you. I think that taking a tight end at that moment, although it would be kind of a flashy move, doesn't really go with kind of what they're looking to do. A lot of guys, where people talk about that Jace Sternberger, I think out of Texas A&M, kind of as like a 3rd, 4th round type guy to target. So I'm with Meg in that one.
Yeah, and folks, we are on YouTube now. I forgot to plug this right away, but if you are following us, hit us a subscribe button, smash that like button, because obviously we're doing this big time. We wanted to kick this off with these 2 episodes, but we're here with Maggie Lawler. You can follow her at Maggie Lawler, because obviously it's not Maggie Loney, because now we figured that out. But yeah, I agree with both of you. But here's my little sentiment on it. I feel like you just got done saying you need to give Rodgers more weapons. You need to give him a reason to, have ease and have less on his plate and not feel like he has to do everything and put everything on the weight of his shoulders. I know the system and Matt LaFleur is supposed to give that, and the way that you can open up, the playbook and the routes and open up just the field for him. But at the same time, I feel like, yes, Mercedes Lewis is getting older. Jimmy Graham is old, and you don't really know
what about Tanyan.
And Tanyan's
I
raw.
honestly kind of feel like he could be somebody. I mean, it's based on one catch he made.
I mean, he's
Seattle,
working out with with George Kittles, right? So, I don't. Here's the thing. I do feel like when you have 2 first-round picks, you can kind of take a risk on a pick, because the fact of one of them being kind of free from the Saints. But I really do feel like if you can get that offensive lineman or that edge rusher or that interior guy with that first pick at 12, you can go and try to just take one of those big name guys like a Fant, like a Irv Smith Jr.
Or receiver.
Or yeah, you could even say receiver. I mean, I think more importantly it's tight end just because of the I guess the age that's already at the position, the fact that they're all on 1-year deals right now, and the fact that Tanyan really hasn't shown you anything yet. So I think you need to solidify that for the years to come. And would you rather have a really top-end blue-chip tight end in the first round and maybe like a draft and develop kind of guy in the later rounds, or would you rather have 2 4th-round tight ends that are probably the same ceiling, maybe a little higher? I guess we'll never know because sometimes guys like or George Kittle, who were in the 5th round or whatever it was, they end up blossoming into like something huge.
I think the kicker seems to be the offensive line. Like, do you use that extra pick 30 on an offensive lineman, or do you trade back on 12 and try to take one in the mid-20s? Or, the Packers have had a lot of success at finding good linemen in the mid rounds. I mean, Bakhtiari, et cetera, kind of guys they picked between with 3rd and 5th rounds. Maybe they keep that going. That 30th pick, that's what I'm looking at is like that's the X factor one. Maybe that's the pick that you use on something you normally wouldn't do, like a tight end or something flashy. Because I've been honking the horn for adding offensive weapons, and then I'm sitting here saying, well, you shouldn't take a tight end. but really, adding another receiver or, getting Irv Smith or Noah Fant, I don't think Hawk lasts till 30. I just think they got to bring something in there. But I think we can all agree the fact that the Packers signing the 2 Smiths at edge really freed up those picks for them to be a little bit more flexible. Can you imagine
if we didn't do that? If we were still under the TED process of free agency, or even just the fact that maybe even if it was Gutekunst that just didn't find any of the deals, or maybe the fact that nobody really wanted to come here and he wanted to spend and nobody wanted to buy it. If we were still sitting with all those needs at edge rusher, at safety, and interior, like this would be a way different kind of draft because then you're just kind of like you're drafting that need.
That need, and you don't want to be
exactly. So this is a good situation for the Packers. But Maggie, we're going to throw this at you because obviously we just kind of focused on those 4, I guess positions that are kind of need or I guess of depth because you mentioned it when you came on this show before. You and I hope we have a clip of this, but you definitely said, "Hey, the draft is more for getting some depth, getting some more players on that roster or on that bench or in that roster that can help you when a guy like a Devontae Adams goes down or someone like Mike Daniels goes down, and you need to just plug and play and just have maybe not the same exact output, but at least something that is efficient enough to be on the field that doesn't decrease the amount of play by like a lot, right? And that's what the draft is usually for. Those first couple picks, those are some impact players that can make some, big time contributions like a Derwin James did for the Chargers. Don't know how he already, that's going to be the story for his entire career. He fell, and now this guy's basically on his way to Canton right now in the year that he had. But Maggie, what is your thought, especially with this draft? We just kind of mentioned the free agents that we just took, but whether it be safety, whether it be edge rusher or offensive line, I mean, is there still kind of that thought process of that we kind of do need to draft at need?
Well, I think about, and I talked about this a little bit on Twitter, and I talked about it with Fred from the sweep. But to me, when you look at something like the offensive line, the Packers historically are able to find some really good talent along the offensive line, which is typically a position of need, and they find it in the mid-rounds. So to think about the fact that they might actually be considering taking an offensive lineman really early in the draft does say a lot about how much they would consider that a need. And I know that they're still going to draft the best available player in that situation. But I do think if you have 2 equally weighted guys, one's a corner and one's an offensive lineman, in this scenario, you're definitely taking the lineman. And something that I've been wondering and kind of trying to talk through on Twitter with some people is just the thought of, what that offensive line room is going to look like. Now, the Packers, if they open up their guard cupboard, it's not bare, right? Like they have Justin McRae, they have Lucas Patrick, Cole Madison just came back. I know he's been off football for a year, so that's some development that's going to have to happen. They have Nico Siragusa. They just signed Billy Turner to that 4-year contract, which you would not have offered him that much money if you didn't expect him to be an immediate starter.
Exactly, yes.
So is he your right guard of the future? Is he your right guard for 4 years? And then right now you're considering drafting Brian Valaga's replacement? Or maybe is Billy Turner your right tackle of the future? And then you want to draft your right guard of the future, and then maybe you look at like a Chris Lindstrom. So to me, kind of where they go on draft night is going to project how the rest of the offensive line looks.
Well, Maggie, I want to throw this at you with the offensive line. I mean, isn't that the whole reason you did draft Cole Madison and you got a steal, maybe like some gem that you're not, that Milt Hendrickson probably brought to your pretty much at your hands with Nico Siragusa? Because, I mean, these two guys could potentially be the fix at guard. I mean, these guys were, really good. I mean, at least with Cole Madison, he was a not great, but pretty solid right tackle, and he's got shifted into the guard position. Obviously, we don't know what he's like now that he had the whole year off. We'll see what he kind of comes back in with shape. But, I would think that's the whole reason you have so much of this depth that you're, at a certain position, that you can focus on a different position like that right tackle where you are thin, where you really don't believe in Jason Spriggs. You really don't know if maybe you did really just sign Billy Turner to that guard more so than tackle. But do you feel the same way about that interior?
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely one of the advocates for having guys like Justin McCray and Lucas Patrick on your roster. Like, I don't know if you would want to ride them as one of your starters for an entire season. And I love Justin McCray. He is one of my guys. He started following me on Twitter a while ago, so my bias might be showing there. But, those are the kind of guys, the McCrays and the Patricks, that you always want to have on your roster. Like, to me, McCray and Patrick are the new Don Barclay, where you can plug him in anywhere along the line and he can play for you. Do you want Don Barclay to be your starting left tackle in a playoff game? No, you don't really prefer that scenario, but, can he get the job done on limited snaps or in an emergency? Yes, he can. So to me, I think that's, like you said, you kind of have to figure out if the guys you brought in, the Madison and the Siragusa, are these guys there to provide depth? Is it going to be a training camp battle? But, you're not going to waste a pick that high if it's someone that you hope never starts. Like, if you're picking someone at pick 30, there's a really good chance that at least by midseason they're your new starter long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think more than ever the offense, well, not more than ever, but the offensive line definitely is important. I know it's not a flashy pick, and when fans think about taking, offensive linemen in the first round, you kind of cringe at it a little bit. But really, if you look at some of the Packers' problems the last few years, you could really directly relate that to some of the issues they've had up front with having to play musical chairs and flip guys around. It's no secret Rodgers, last year, part of his, the issues he had was he had a guy in his face immediately. So, I think there's something to be said about considering, one of those, guards or tackles here in the first round and really shoring that up. I think that could contribute to, Rodgers' longevity and the success of the, the offense.
All right, so Maggie, we're going to do a little flash fire here with you. We're going to put you on the spot. I know you didn't want me to do that, but I'm going to do it to you now. So if you can pick 3 names, I'm going to throw positions at you. You just tell me if you have some names that you think that we could go. If we go 12 and we take cornerback, who are you taking?
Probably Greedy Williams. And just so you know, when you put me on the spot and don't tell me, that means I'm never coming back.
Well, I mean,
Forgive Sanjay.
Crap. I was going to say a different word, but I'll say crap. But, all right, so if you are drafting a tackle, who are you drafting at 12?
I think I'm taking Dalton Reisner because to me, he is the perfect Packers tackle. I don't know if he'd be the first tackle off the board otherwise, but if I'm taking tackle at 12, I like Reisner.
If you're picking at pick 30, are you taking a linebacker or are you taking a tight end?
I'm taking an edge rusher or an interior lineman like a Jeffrey Simmons.
If you are taking one of your picks in the 3rd round, are you trading up or are you trading down?
I'm trading up.
And if you take it back, if you're trying to trade up, what are you getting?
I am either taking an edge rusher if I haven't taken one yet, or maybe I'm moving up to get a second safety, because I think they're going to get one at 44, or a tight end.
If you just took Dalton Reisner at 12 overall and DK Metcalf sitting at 30, what do you do?
I am not taking DK Metcalf.
Good answer. All right, Megan, that's enough. We'll stop putting you on the spot, but that was awesome stuff. You can follow her at Maggie Lawler. She's there. She's all over Twitter. She's all over for the Lombardi Lounge. She does amazing stuff there. You can also follow her with Cheesehead TV and the Pack a Day podcast that she does once a month, right? Or is it twice a month that you do the Pack a Day podcast?
Yeah, I was on a marriage hiatus, but now back in May I'll be 2
Ditto.
times a month.
Awesome. So yeah, you can follow her on all those different areas. Please watch her stuff and listen and read her stuff.
Remember
it's
the
all
draft,
good.
the draft party.
Yeah,
Tune in, it'll be fun.
exactly. In the draft party, she'll be in and out of there with all the guys over there at Cheesehead TV and everyone. So, Maggie, thank you so much for joining the Freezer Podcast one more time. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, hopefully you come back, even though I put you on the spot. But maybe we can try to get you back into maybe towards training camp. But it means the world to Matt and I. Really, it does to have you on our show.
Again, you're way too nice to me, but I will be back. I'll be wearing a different BJ Raji jersey. I have 2 of them, so I like to mix it up for every occasion.
Okay, and you know what? I'm going to just say this right now. You're only 3 hours away from us, so next time that you are on the show, you're going to actually physically be on the show. So we're going to have you in our studio. We're going to have you mic'd up. You're going to be wearing the Raji jersey, and then we're good to go. So for this is the Freezer Podcast. Like I said, follow us, subscribe to us, smash that like button. We're here. We talk Packer stuff. I'm Sanjay.
And I'm Matt.
Go Pack, go.
Day ones, no time for fake ones. Got me, I got you. All dreams, they come true. Stay down till the